The Galactic Council had made its decision. After 300 years of debate, 17 failed integration attempts, and countless diplomatic incidents, they had finally found a solution to the human problem. They would send them to Carvax 9. Admiral Zethkar stood before the massive observation window of the Galactic Senate Chamber, his 4 eyes watching the blue marble called Earth spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Behind him, representatives from over 1,000 species murmured their approval. The Valori delegate, a creature of pure crystalline energy, pulsed with satisfaction. The Morkith ambassador, whose species resembled massive insects, clicked its mandibles in agreement. "It is done then," Zethkar announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of frustration. "The humans will be relocated to Carvax 9. They wanted their own world. They wanted independence from council rule. Now they shall have it." A ripple of dark amusement passed through the chamber. Every species present knew what Carvax 9 was. It was the only Class 15 Deathworld in the known galaxy. It was a planet so dangerous that even automated probes lasted only hours before being destroyed. It was a world where the very air was poison, where the ground could swallow entire cities, where creatures existed that defied the laws of biology. The Council had sent expedition after expedition to Carvax 9 over the millennia. The Velari had lost an entire fleet trying to establish a research station. The Morkith had attempted colonization 7 times, and 7 times their warriors had been slaughtered to the last individual. Even the mighty Draconeth, a species of spacefaring dragons who had conquered 1,000 worlds, had declared Carvax 9 unconquerable after losing their greatest general to its horrors. No species had ever survived more than 3 standard galactic days on Carvax 9's surface. The Council was certain the humans would fare no better. Within a single rotation of the planet, the human problem would be solved forever. The Morkith ambassador leaned toward the Valori delegate. "How long do you think they will last?" The crystalline being flickered with calculation. "Based on our data, the humans possess no natural armor, no venomous defenses, no enhanced sensory capabilities. They require constant hydration, regular nutrition, and specific atmospheric conditions. I estimate 18 standard hours before complete extinction." "Generous," clicked the Morkith. "I give them 6. Far across the galaxy, on the deck of the human transport ship Endeavor, Captain Sarah Chen stood before 10,000 of her people. They filled the massive cargo bay, families huddled together, children clinging to their parents, elders sitting quietly on makeshift benches. The air smelled of fear and uncertainty. Sarah looked at them and felt her heart break. These were her people. Farmers and scientists, teachers and builders, artists and engineers. They had done nothing wrong except be born human. They had committed no crime except existing in a galaxy that did not want them. She remembered the day the Council's decree had arrived. Humanity was being expelled from civilized space. They were being given a world of their own, the Council had said, a chance to build their own civilization without interference. The Council had failed to mention that world was designed to kill them. But Sarah had learned the truth. Her contacts in the intelligence community had uncovered the reality of Carvax 9. They had discovered the casualty reports, the expedition logs, the classified death tolls. They knew exactly what the Council was doing. And yet, they had no choice. The alternative was extermination where they stood. At least on Carvax 9, they had a chance, however small. At least on Carvax 9, they could fight. Sarah raised her hand, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "I know you're scared," she said, her voice amplified across the bay. "I know you've heard the stories about where we're going. I know the Council expects us to die there." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But they don't know us. They don't understand what we are. They look at us and see a species without natural weapons, without armor, without venom. They see weakness." Sarah's eyes hardened. "They don't see the ancestors who walked out of Africa with nothing but sharpened sticks and conquered an entire world. They don't see the generations who survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended us. They don't see the stubborn, impossible, relentless spirit that has carried humanity through every challenge the universe has thrown at us. The crowd stirred, backs straightened, eyes lifted. The council thinks they're sending us to our death, but they're making a mistake. They're sending us home. Sarah smiled grimly. Because Earth was a death world too, and we didn't just survive it, we conquered it. The Endeavour entered orbit around Carvax 9 3 weeks later. From space, the planet looked almost beautiful. Its atmosphere swirled with purple and crimson clouds. Its surface was a patchwork of black forests and silver oceans and mountains that scraped the edge of space itself. But beauty was deceptive here. Every element of that landscape was designed to kill. The first landing party consisted of 50 volunteers. Sarah insisted on leading them personally, despite the objections of her command staff. They descended in armored shuttles, their hulls reinforced with the best materials human engineering could produce. They wore environmental suits designed to withstand temperatures from absolute zero to the heart of a star. They carried weapons that had been tested against every known threat in the galaxy. None of it would be enough. They all knew that. But they went anyway. The shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by the Black Forest. The trees, if they could be called that, rose hundreds of meters into the air. Their bark was darker than night, and their branches twisted in impossible angles. Bioluminescent organisms crawled along their surfaces, creating patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Sarah was the first to step onto the soil of Carvax 9. The ground was soft beneath her boots, almost springy. Sensors immediately detected movement below the surface. Something large, something hungry. Spread out, she ordered through her helmet comm. Standard perimeter formation. And remember, if it moves, document it before you shoot it. We need to understand this world if we're going to survive it. The team moved with practiced efficiency. They were soldiers and scientists, pioneers and explorers. They had trained for this moment for months during the journey. They knew that every second on this world could be their last. The first attack came within minutes. The creature burst from the tree line without warning. It was massive, easily 5 meters tall at the shoulder. It resembled nothing in Earth's biological history. A nightmare fusion of reptile and insect, with armored plates covering its body and mandibles that could crush steel. Its 6 legs propelled it forward with terrifying speed. 2 team members opened fire immediately. Energy beams struck the creature's armor and bounced away harmlessly. Projectile weapons left only scratches on its hide. It kept coming, closing the distance with impossible velocity. Sarah didn't hesitate. She pulled the experimental weapon from her back, a device that human engineers had been developing in secret for years. It was a directed plasma lance, powerful enough to cut through starship hulls. It was also unstable, prone to overheating, and potentially explosive. She fired. The beam struck the creature directly in its open mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the beast exploded from the inside out, showering the clearing with organic material. The team stood in stunned silence. "Well," said Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's chief biologist. That was bracing. Sarah looked at the smoking remains of the creature. Already, she could see smaller organisms emerging from the forest, drawn by the smell of death. Some crawled, some flew, some seemed to phase in and out of existence like ghosts. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Set up the monitoring equipment. I want to know everything about this planet, its rhythms, its predators, its vulnerabilities. If we're going to survive here, we need to learn faster than anything has ever learned before." Over the following days, the full scale of Carvax 9's hostility became apparent. The atmosphere contained 17 different compounds that were toxic to human biology. The gravity was 20% higher than Earth standard. The solar radiation during the day was intense enough to cause burns through standard protective gear. The temperature swings between day and night were over 100 degrees. And then there were the creatures. The Carvaxian ecosystem was a masterpiece of evolutionary arms race pushed to its absolute extreme. Every organism on the planet was a predator. There were no herbivores, no peaceful grazers, no gentle creatures. Everything ate everything else. the only law was consumption. The burrowers attacked from below, massive worm-like beasts that could swallow entire vehicles. The flyers attacked from above, swarms of creatures that stripped flesh from bone in seconds. The stalkers attacked from the shadows, invisible predators that could only be detected by the displacement of air as they moved. And those were just the fauna. The flora was equally hostile. Trees that released clouds of paralytic spores when disturbed. Vines that moved with deliberate intelligence, seeking warm bodies to constrict and digest. Flowers that emitted frequencies designed to drive prey mad with pain. By the end of the first week, the human colony had lost 37 people. The council would have considered this expected attrition. They would have predicted complete extinction within days. But something unexpected began to happen. The humans adapted. They learned the patterns of the burrowers and developed seismic sensors to detect their approach. They mapped the migration routes of the flyer swarms and built shelters that could seal within milliseconds. They discovered that the stalkers could be detected with ultraviolet light and modified their equipment accordingly. More importantly, they began to fight back. Dr. Webb dissected every creature they killed, cataloging weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Human engineers developed new weapons specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. Human soldiers trained in techniques tailored to each threat. By the end of the first month, human casualties had dropped by 70%. By the end of the second month, humans were no longer just surviving, they were hunting. The Galactic Council received its first report from Carvax 9 on the 90th day of human colonization. The report was delivered by an automated probe that had been programmed to observe from orbit and transmit its findings. Admiral Zethkar read the report in his private chambers. As he processed the information, his 4 eyes widened with an emotion he had not felt in centuries. Fear. The humans were not dead. They were not dying. According to the probe's observations, human population on Carvax 9 had actually increased. Births were outpacing deaths. Infrastructure was being constructed. Agricultural systems were being developed. And the planet's apex predators were avoiding human settlements entirely. Zethkar summoned an emergency session of the council. When he shared the report, the chamber erupted in chaos. This was impossible. This defied every projection, every model, every understanding of galactic biology. The Valori delegates' form flickered with agitation. There must be an error in the probe's sensors. There is no error, Zethkar replied grimly. I have verified the data 17 times. The humans are surviving Carvax 9. Then we must send a more detailed observation team, suggested the Morketh ambassador. Perhaps the humans have found some kind of shelter, some hidden cave system that protects them from the environment. Zethkar shook his head. The probe recorded humans walking openly on the surface. They were not hiding. They were building, and they were carrying trophies. A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a human male walking through the black forest. Over his shoulder was draped the head of a creature that the Draconith had once declared unkillable. A beast they had named the World Eater. The human was smiling. The Draconith representative, a creature of scales and fire, rose from its seat. This is a trick. The World Eater cannot be killed by conventional weapons. We lost 100 of our greatest warriors trying to bring one down. Nevertheless, said Zethkar, the evidence is clear. The humans have not only survived Carvax 9, they are conquering it. Silence fell over the chamber. For the first time in millennia, the assembled representatives of 1,000 species felt something that they had believed themselves beyond. They felt afraid of a species they had dismissed as primitive. They felt afraid of humans. And deep in the heart of Carvax 9, something else felt that fear as well. Something old, something vast, something that had existed since the planet's formation billions of years ago. The planet itself was awakening. It had tolerated the humans' presence at first, assuming they would die like all the others. It had watched with ancient patience as they struggled against its children. It had expected them to break, to flee, to perish. But they had not. And now, for the first time in its eternal existence, Carvax 9 felt an unfamiliar sensation spreading through its geological consciousness. The planet felt worried. The ground trembled beneath the human settlement of New Hope. Sarah Chen felt it in her bones before the sensors registered anything unusual. She had developed an instinct for this world over the past 6 months, a primal awareness that told her when something was wrong. Something was very wrong. She stood in the command center of the settlement, a reinforced bunker that served as the nerve center for all human operations on Carvax 9. Around her, technicians monitored dozens of screens showing data feeds from sensors scattered across the surrounding territory. Everything had been normal until 30 seconds ago. Now every reading was spiking off the charts. Lieutenant Commander James Okonkwo rushed in, his dark skin glistening with sweat despite the climate-controlled environment. He had been outside, supervising the construction of the new perimeter wall. His expression told Sarah everything she needed to know. "We have a situation," he said. "The ground is moving. And I don't mean tremors, I mean actively moving, like something underneath is trying to push through." Sarah turned to the geological monitoring station. Dr. Elena Vasquez was already working frantically, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Talk to me, Elena," Sarah ordered. "I'm seeing coordinated seismic activity across a radius of 50 kilometers, Elena replied, her voice tight with controlled fear. "This isn't natural. The patterns are too precise, too deliberate. It's almost like something is trying to reshape the terrain around us." "That's exactly what's happening," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Dr. Marcus Webb entering the command center. The chief biologist looked exhausted. He had been awake for 3 days straight, studying samples and running analyses. But his eyes burned with a mixture of terror and excitement. "I've been reviewing the data we've collected over the past 6 months," Marcus continued. "The behavioral patterns of the fauna, the growth cycles of the flora, the chemical composition of the atmosphere. I've found something disturbing. Everything on this planet, every single organism, is connected." "Connected how?" Sarah asked. Marcus pulled up a holographic display. It showed a complex web of lines and nodes, a network of staggering complexity, connected like neurons in a brain. Carvax 9 isn't just a planet with life on it. Carvax 9 is alive. The entire biosphere functions as a single organism. Every creature, every plant, every microbe, they're all cells in a planetary body. And the planet has become aware that we're here. It's decided we're a threat. And now it's going to try to eliminate us. Silence hung in the air. Sarah absorbed the implications of what Marcus was saying. They weren't just fighting individual predators. They weren't just surviving hostile conditions. They were at war with an entire world. "What's it doing?" she finally asked. Marcus pointed to the seismic readings. "It's restructuring the terrain. Look at the patterns. The ground is rising in a complete circle around our settlement. Within hours, we'll be surrounded by walls of rock hundreds of meters high. No way in, no way out. And then it will fill the enclosed space with everything it has: predators, toxic gas, seismic activity. It's creating a death chamber specifically designed for us." James cursed under his breath. "Can we evacuate? Get to higher ground before the walls close?" "Negative," said a voice from the sensor station. Technician First Class Amy Morrison was pale as she studied her screens. "I'm detecting massive fauna movement converging on all escape routes. Hundreds of signatures, maybe thousands. They're waiting for us to run." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She had faced impossible odds before. She had led humanity through the darkest days of their arrival on this world. She had buried friends and loved ones and kept going because there was no other choice. She opened her eyes and saw her people looking at her. They were scared. They should be scared, but they were also waiting for orders. They trusted her. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "If the planet wants a fight, we'll give it one. James, I want every combat-ready individual armed and in defensive positions within the hour. Elena, I need you to analyze the seismic patterns and find any weaknesses in what it's building. If it's creating walls, there might be stress points we can exploit. Marcus, You said everything on this planet is connected. That means it has a nervous system. Can we hurt it? Can we cause it pain? Marcus considered the question. Theoretically, yes. If we could find and damage enough key nodes in the network, we could disrupt its coordination, like causing a seizure or a stroke, but the nodes would be deeply embedded in the biosphere. We'd have to dig down kilometers to reach them. Sarah smiled grimly. Then we dig. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Every human in New Hope worked with desperate intensity, understanding that failure meant extinction. Engineers reconfigured drilling equipment. Soldiers fortified positions. Scientists analyzed data looking for any advantage. The walls of rock continued to rise around them, slowly but inexorably. Through optical sensors mounted on drones, they watched the process with horrified fascination. The ground simply flowed upward, like liquid, reshaping itself according to the planet's will. It was beautiful in its way, a demonstration of power beyond anything humanity had ever witnessed. But humans had never been a species that accepted defeat easily. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the colony's leading xenogeologist, made the breakthrough. She had been studying the composition of the rising walls when she noticed something peculiar. The rock wasn't uniform. Running through it were thin veins of a crystalline substance that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. "It's neural tissue," she announced to the assembled leadership team. "Mineralized neural tissue, but functional. These veins are how the planet's consciousness extends through its geological structure. Damage these, and we damage its ability to control the terrain." "Can we synthesize something that would attack the tissue?" Sarah asked. Yuki nodded slowly. "I believe so. The tissue has a unique chemical signature. I can develop a compound that would cause it to necrotize rapidly, but we'd need to inject it directly into the veins, and they're embedded deep in the rock." James leaned forward. "What if we don't inject it? What if we weaponize it? Create an aerosol that could penetrate the rock through microfissures?" Yuki considered this. "It would need to be highly concentrated, and we'd need a way to create enough pressure to force it through solid stone. But yes, theoretically, it could work." "Then make it work," Sarah said. "We have 11 hours before those walls close." The entire scientific division threw themselves into the task. They synthesized the compound in batches, working with dangerous chemicals in improvised laboratory conditions. 3 researchers suffered chemical burns. 1 nearly died from exposure to toxic fumes. None of them stopped working. Meanwhile, the military division prepared for the assault they knew was coming. The planet wouldn't just rely on terrain manipulation. It would send its creatures. James organized the defenders into overlapping fields of fire, ensuring that no angle of approach was unguarded. They stockpiled ammunition and prepared backup weapons. They dug fallback positions and escape tunnels. As the walls rose higher, blocking out the alien sun, Sarah walked among her people. She spoke to frightened civilians, reassuring them with a calm she didn't entirely feel. She checked on the wounded from previous encounters, making sure they were as comfortable as possible. She prayed quietly for the souls of those they had already lost. In the 6th hour, the creatures came. They poured through the gaps in the still-forming walls like water through a breaking dam. Thousands of them, every species the planet could muster. The burrowers erupted from the ground inside the perimeter. The flyers descended from the narrow strip of sky still visible above. The stalkers materialized from shadows that shouldn't have existed in the artificial light of the settlement. And behind them came something new. Something worse. It walked on 2 legs like a human. It was humanoid in shape, with 2 arms and a recognizable head. But it was wrong in every other way. Its skin was the black of the forest trees. Its eyes glowed with the same bioluminescence as the planetary neural tissue. Its body was covered in plates of the same material as the rising walls. There were hundreds of them. The planet had looked at its enemy and created soldiers specifically designed to fight them. It had analyzed human biology and human behavior and crafted a response. The humanoid creatures carried weapons carved from organic material, blades and clubs and things that had no earthly equivalent. They moved with terrible coordination, a single consciousness directing 1,000 bodies. They worked together without communication, anticipating each other's movements perfectly. "What the hell are those?" James shouted over the chaos of battle. Marcus, taking shelter behind a reinforced wall, stared at the creatures with academic horror. "The planet made them. It looked at us and decided to fight fire with fire. Those things are anti-human weapons, bioengineered specifically to kill us." The battle that followed was the most desperate in human history. For every creature the defenders killed, 3 more seemed to take its place. The humanoid warriors proved terrifyingly effective, their organic weapons somehow capable of piercing human armor. Defenders fell by the dozens, their screams mixing with the alien shrieks of their attackers. But humans were not so easily overcome. James led a counterattack that shattered the first wave of humanoid warriors. His soldiers had studied their movement patterns during the initial assault and identified weaknesses. The creatures' coordination made them predictable. They expected their opponents to fight as individuals. They didn't expect coordinated human tactics. Human squads worked in tight formations, covering each other's blind spots, creating kill zones that the planet's soldiers walked into again and again. Human snipers targeted the creatures that seemed to be directing local groups, disrupting the planetary consciousness's command structure. Human demolition teams collapsed buildings to create choke points, funneling the enemy into prepared ambushes. And in the settlement's central laboratory, Dr. Tanaka finally completed her work. The delivery system was crude but effective. They had constructed a series of high-pressure cylinders containing the concentrated compound. The cylinders would be fired from modified artillery tubes directly at the base of the rising walls. The impact would shatter the cylinders and drive the compound deep into the rock. "It's ready," Yuki announced over the command frequency. "But we'll only have one chance. If this doesn't work, we don't have the materials or time to make more." Sarah looked at the tactical display. Their perimeter was collapsing. They had lost nearly a quarter of their fighting force. The walls were almost complete, leaving only narrow gaps that funneled in more and more attackers. "Do it," she ordered. The artillery teams fired simultaneously. 24 cylinders arced through the air and struck the walls in a perfect pattern. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the bioluminescent veins in the rock began to flicker. Then they began to darken. Then they began to die. The effect propagated faster than anyone had predicted. The necrotic compound spread through the neural tissue like a disease, jumping from vein to vein, node to node. The walls stopped rising. Then they began to crack. Then they began to crumble. And across the entire 50-kilometer radius of the planet's attack, every creature suddenly screamed. It was a sound no human would ever forget. Thousands of voices raised in a single note of pure agony. The humanoid warriors collapsed where they stood, their bodies convulsing. The burrowers thrashed mindlessly, destroying each other in their pain. The flyers fell from the sky like rain. The planet had felt real pain for the first time in billions of years, and it had felt it because of the humans. Silence fell over New Hope. The defenders stood among the bodies of their enemies, gasping for breath, hardly believing what had happened. They had won. Against a living planet, against impossible odds, they had won. Sarah climbed to the top of the crumbling wall and looked out at the devastation. As far as she could see, the creatures of Carvax 9 lay still or dying. The ground had stopped moving. The world was quiet. Then she felt something. It wasn't a sound or a sensation. It was a presence, vast and ancient, pressing against her consciousness like a wave against a rock. The planet was reaching out to her. The planet was trying to communicate. Images flooded her mind. She saw the planet's birth, billions of years ago, from the chaos of cosmic dust. She saw the first stirrings of life, the long evolution of the interconnected biosphere. She saw countless species arrive from the stars, try to conquer the world, and fail. She felt the planet's pride in its invincibility, and she felt its current emotion clearly. Not anger, not hatred, not desire for vengeance. Fear. The planet was afraid of them. Sarah opened her eyes and found herself on her knees, tears streaming down her face. Marcus was beside her, supporting her, asking if she was all right. She could hardly hear him over the echo of what she had experienced. "It's afraid," she whispered. "The planet is afraid of us." "Afraid?" Marcus repeated. "That's not possible. It's a planet. It's been here for billions of years." Sarah shook her head. "It's never felt pain before. We heard it. We showed it that it could be hurt. And now it's wondering if we can do worse." She stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Around her, humans were beginning the grim work of tending the wounded and counting the dead. They had survived, but at a terrible cost. Nearly 400 humans had died in the battle. Hundreds more were injured, but they were still alive. They were still fighting, and the planet knew it. In the days that followed, something remarkable began to happen. The creatures of Carvax 9 started avoiding human settlements entirely. Predators that had once attacked on sight now fled at the first sign of human presence. The hostile flora retracted, leaving clear paths where humans walked. The toxic spores stopped releasing in human-occupied areas. The planet was adapting to the humans, not by fighting them, but by making room for them. Dr. Webb theorized that the planetary consciousness had made a decision. Having experienced pain and the possibility of more pain, it had calculated that coexistence was preferable to continued conflict. The humans had proven themselves too dangerous to eliminate. Therefore, the planet would treat them as it had never treated any other species. It would treat them as equals. Admiral Zethkar received the latest report from Carvax 9 inches his quarters. His hands trembled as he read the data. The humans had not only survived the planet's assault, they had defeated it. They had forced a living world to submit to their presence. He thought about the implications. He thought about what would happen if the humans ever left Carvax 9. He thought about what they might do to the species that had condemned them to die there. For the first time in his long life, Admiral Zethkar began to question whether the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not supposed to be this strong. The humans were not supposed to be capable of this. The galaxy had underestimated them, dismissed them as weak and primitive and expendable. The galaxy, Zethkar realized, might have created its own worst nightmare. And somewhere in the depths of Carvax 9, the planetary consciousness stirred with a new understanding. It had existed for billions of years. It had seen species rise and fall like waves on its endless shores. It had believed itself eternal and invincible, but now it knew the truth. There were creatures in the universe that it could not defeat. There were beings that would not break, would not flee, would not die as they were supposed to. There were humans. And the planet, for all its power and age and terrible majesty, found itself wondering what would happen next. 3 years had passed since the battle that changed everything. The settlement of New Hope had grown into a proper city, with buildings that rose toward the alien sky and streets that hummed with human activity. The population had tripled through births and the arrival of additional ships from human space. Trade routes connected New Hope to 7 other human settlements scattered across Carvax 9's surface. What had been meant as a death sentence had become a homeworld. Sarah Chen stood on the balcony of her office in the Planetary Administration Building. She was no longer just a captain. The survivors had elected her governor of the human territories of Carvax 9. It was a title she had never wanted but had accepted because her people needed her. Below, she could see the morning markets opening. Human vendors sold goods alongside creatures that would have been trying to kill them 3 years ago. The planet had not just accepted human presence, it had embraced it. In some strange way, the planetary consciousness seemed to have developed something like affection for its new inhabitants. Dr. Marcus Webb had spent years studying the phenomenon. He believed that the planet had recognized in humans something it had never encountered before. A species that treated it as a rival rather than prey. For billions of years, Carvax 9 had consumed every species that set foot on its surface. But humans had fought back. They had earned respect. And in earning respect, they had gained something far more valuable. They had gained an ally. The integration had happened gradually. It began with small things. The hostile flora started producing fruits that were safe for human consumption. The water in certain lakes became purified of toxins. The air near human settlements grew cleaner, the 17 toxic compounds somehow filtering out. Then came the larger changes. Certain creatures began following human hunting parties, not to attack, but to assist. They would drive prey toward human ambushes or warn of dangers with distinctive calls. The burrowers stopped appearing near human infrastructure and started appearing near threats, collapsing tunnels under anything that might endanger the settlements. And the humanoid warriors, the creatures the planet had created specifically to fight humans, underwent the most remarkable transformation of all. They didn't disappear. Instead, they evolved. Their weapons became tools. Their aggression became protectiveness. They began patrolling human territories, defending them against the wild creatures that still existed in the unexplored regions of the planet. Dr. Yuki Tanaka called them the Guardians. The name stuck. The Guardians stood at the gates of New Hope even now, their black forms silhouetted against the morning light. They had learned to understand human speech, though they never spoke themselves. They had learned to recognize individual humans, to distinguish between residents and visitors. They had become as much a part of human society as the humans themselves. Sarah sometimes wondered what the planetary consciousness thought about all this. She occasionally still felt its presence brushing against her mind, but the communication was never clear. Images and emotions, impressions and sensations, but never words. She got the sense that the planet was watching, learning, adapting to its new reality. Today, however, the planet was not the only thing watching. Sarah's communication officer, Lieutenant Commander Amy Morrison, rushed onto the balcony with an expression of controlled panic. "Governor, we've detected a fleet entering the system. Galactic Council ships. 17 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. They had known this day would come. The Council had been silent for 3 years, but silence didn't mean acceptance. It meant they were planning. "Get me James," she said, and convened the War Council. "Looks like our peace is about to be tested." The meeting took place in the underground bunker that had served as their command center during the darkest days. Around the table sat the leaders of human society on Carvax 9, James Okonkwo, now General of the Human Defense Forces, Dr. Webb, Minister of Science, Dr. Tanaka, Minister of Planetary Relations, a dozen others, each responsible for some essential aspect of their civilization. "The fleet has taken up position in high orbit," James reported. "They're not approaching, they're just watching. Long-range scans show they're heavily armed. Those dreadnoughts could glass the entire surface from that distance." "Why haven't they attacked?" asked Dr. Tanaka. "They're scared," Sarah replied. Everyone turned to look at her. "Think about it. They sent us here expecting us to die. Instead, we conquered a Class 15 Deathworld. We defeated a living planet. They have no idea what else we're capable of. They're afraid that if they attack, we might do something unthinkable." "Can we?" James asked bluntly. "If they start bombarding us from orbit, what can we do?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, but I think we should ask." She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. It was something she had learned to do over the years, a form of communication that existed beyond words. She had never tried anything this ambitious before, but desperate times demanded desperate measures. The response was immediate. Images flooded her consciousness. The fleet in orbit, seen from a perspective far below. The planet's awareness of the threat, its assessment of the danger, and then a question, conveyed not in words but in pure meaning. "Do you wish us to defend you?" Sarah hesitated. She felt the vastness of the planetary consciousness waiting for her answer. She felt the power coiled within the world beneath her feet. Power that had humbled 1,000 species across millions of years. "I need to understand what you can do," she thought back. "Show me." The response came as a series of visions. She saw the planet's defense systems, mechanisms that had lain dormant for eons because no threat had ever warranted their use. Deep in the planet's core, geothermal energy gathered in concentrations that defied physics. In the upper atmosphere, organisms existed that could survive vacuum and generate electromagnetic pulses. Beneath the oceans, creatures dwelt that could project beams of concentrated radiation across interstellar distances. Carvax 9 was not just a death world. It was a fortress. It was a weapon. And it was offering to use that weapon in defense of its humans. Sarah opened her eyes. Every person in the room was staring at her. "The planet will defend us," she said simply. "If the Council attacks, they won't survive." Admiral Zethkar paced the bridge of his flagship, the Righteous Authority. He had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years gathering intelligence, building political support, assembling his fleet. 3 years convincing the Galactic Council that the human threat must be eliminated before it grew any stronger. Now he was here, orbiting Carvax 9, ready to finish what they had started. But something was wrong. His sensors were screaming. Energy readings from the planet's surface were off the scale. Electromagnetic patterns in the upper atmosphere suggested massive power buildup, and worst of all, his long-range scopes showed something impossible. The surface of the planet was moving, not tremors or earthquakes. The entire surface was shifting, reshaping itself. Mountains were rising in locations that had been flat plains hours before. New structures were appearing, geometric formations that looked almost like weapons platforms. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, voice trembling. "We're detecting launch signatures. Thousands of them. Something is leaving the atmosphere." Zethkar rushed to the viewing port. His 4 eyes widened in horror. Rising from Carvax 9 like seeds from a dying flower, countless objects ascended toward the fleet. They were organic, clearly alive, but they moved with the precision of missiles. They glowed with internal energy, pulsing in coordination with each other. "They're biological weapons," Zethkar breathed. "The planet is launching biological weapons at us." "Should we open fire?" the tactical officer asked. Zethkar hesitated. His fleet was powerful, yes. 3 dreadnoughts, each capable of devastating entire worlds. 14 support vessels, bristling with weapons, but against a planet that could launch its own living armaments? Before he could answer, his communication officer spoke up. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. Audio only. It's coming from the planet's surface. On speaker." The voice that filled the bridge was female. Human. Calm. "Admiral Zethkar, my name is Sarah Chen, Governor of the Human Territories of Carvax 9. I'm giving you one chance to withdraw your fleet. If you do not, the planet will destroy you. This is not a threat. This is a simple statement of fact. You have 10 of your minutes to decide." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in agitation. He had studied humans extensively in preparation for this mission. He knew they were capable of bluffing. But the biological weapons were still rising, still approaching his fleet. They were real. The threat was real. And yet, if he withdrew now, without firing a single shot, his career was over. The Council would brand him a coward. He would be stripped of his rank, possibly imprisoned. Everything he had worked for across centuries of service would be destroyed. "Admiral," the tactical officer said quietly, "the biological weapons have reached effective range. They're surrounding the fleet. If they detonate, we won't survive." Zethkar looked at the tactical display. Thousands of glowing points surrounded his ships like stars surrounding a galaxy. They pulsed in perfect synchronization, waiting. "Target the human settlements," Zethkar ordered suddenly. "Prepare for orbital bombardment. If we're going to die, we'll take them with us." "Admiral, I must advise against." "Do it." The weapons officers moved to comply, but before they could activate the firing sequence, the entire ship shuddered, alarms blared, the lights flickered. "What's happening?" Zethkar demanded. "Something is interfacing with our computer systems," the tactical officer reported, voice rising in panic. "Some kind of invasive program. It's not digital, it's biological. There are organisms growing inside our electronics." On the main display, Zethkar watched as tiny tendrils of organic material emerged from the ship's walls. They spread like roots, infiltrating every system, every circuit, every piece of technology. The same thing was happening across the entire fleet. The planet had not just launched weapons, It had launched spores, microscopic organisms designed to infiltrate and subvert enemy technology. Even now, they were spreading through the fleet, taking control. "Admiral," the communication officer said, "I'm receiving another transmission." Sarah Chen's voice returned, still calm, still measured. "Admiral, you're probably noticing that your systems are compromised. The planet has decided that your fleet belongs to it now. Your weapons are offline. Your engines are offline. Your life support is currently being maintained as a courtesy, but that can change. I suggest you reconsider your position." Zethkar collapsed into his command chair. He had led armadas against the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. He had never in his entire career experienced complete and total defeat. Until now. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hollow. "I want you to go home. I want you to tell the Galactic Council what happened here. I want you to make them understand that humanity is not their enemy. We never wanted to fight. We just wanted to survive. But if they force us to fight, we will win. Every single time." There was a pause. "The planet is releasing your fleet now. Your systems will come back online shortly. You'll be able to leave whenever you're ready. But Admiral, don't come back with hostile intent. The planet remembers. And next time, it won't be so generous." The biological organisms began to retract, pulling back from the ship's systems. One by one, consoles flickered back to life. Engines hummed as power returned. The fleet was free. Zethkar sat in silence for a long moment. Then he gave the only order that made sense. "All ships, prepare to withdraw." The news of the fleet's defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session that lasted for 3 standard days. Debates raged. Accusations flew. Several representatives called for an even larger fleet, an overwhelming force that could destroy Carvax 9 entirely. But calmer voices prevailed. The Valori delegate, whose species had once lost a fleet to Carvax 9, spoke first. "We underestimated the humans from the beginning. We saw them as weak because they lacked natural weapons. We saw them as primitive because their technology was less advanced than ours. But we failed to recognize their true strength. They are survivors. They adapt. They overcome. They persist. And now they have the loyalty of a living planet." The Morkith ambassador clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider our approach. The humans clearly do not wish to be our enemies. They asked only for a world of their own. We gave them one, expecting it to kill them. Instead, they have made it their home. Perhaps we should accept this reality and move forward." The Draconith representative, whose species prided itself on never backing down from a fight, surprised everyone by agreeing. "We sent 17 ships. We lost 17 ships. Not to the humans themselves, but to a planet fighting on their behalf. If we send more ships, we will lose more ships. There is no scenario where we win this conflict. The mathematics are clear." Admiral Zethkar, stripped of his command but allowed to address the council, gave his testimony. "I have fought across 100 worlds. I have faced enemies that would make the nightmares of nightmares run screaming. But I have never faced anything like Carvax 9. The planet thinks. The planet plans. The planet has chosen to protect the humans with every resource at its disposal. And it has resources we cannot imagine. If we continue this war, we will not just lose ships. We will lose the galaxy." The vote that followed was the most significant in Galactic Council history. By a margin of 700 to 300, the Council voted to recognize the human territories of Carvax 9 as a sovereign state. They voted to end all hostilities and open diplomatic relations. They voted to offer humanity a seat on the Council itself. When Sarah received the news, she was standing in the garden she had planted outside her office. The garden grew plants from both Earth and Carvax 9, species that should never have been able to coexist, thriving together in alien soil. "We did it," James said, reading the transmission beside her. "We actually did it. Full recognition. A seat on the Council. Everything we could have asked for." Sarah nodded slowly. "We didn't do it alone. The planet helped. The planet believed in us. She felt the familiar presence brushing against her mind. The planetary consciousness was listening, as it always was. She sensed something like satisfaction in its ancient awareness. "Thank you," she thought toward it. "Thank you for standing with us." The response came not in images or emotions, but in something simpler. Something that felt almost like affection. "You are ours," the planet seemed to say. "You belong here now. You are part of us." Sarah smiled. She looked out at the city of New Hope, at the people living and working and building a future that no one had thought possible. She looked at the guardians standing watch at the gates, at the hybrid ecosystems that surrounded the human settlements, at the alien sky that had become as familiar as the blue skies of Earth. "Yes," she whispered, "we are." In the years that followed, humanity took its seat on the Galactic Council. They sent ambassadors and diplomats, scientists and artists to every corner of civilized space. They shared the lessons they had learned on Carvax 9, lessons about resilience and adaptation, and the power of refusing to give up. And they changed the galaxy. The species that had once dismissed them as weak and primitive began to see them differently. They saw humans build alliances with creatures that other species couldn't even approach. They saw humans solve problems that had baffled the galaxy for millennia. They saw humans walk into situations that should have been impossible and walk out victorious. Most importantly, they saw humans treat the galaxy the way they had treated Carvax 9, not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a challenge to be embraced, not as a hostile environment, but as a home waiting to be made. The Galactic Council had meant to destroy humanity by sending them to a Class 15 Deathworld. Instead, they had unleashed them. They had given humanity a crucible that forged them into something new, something stronger, something that the galaxy had never seen before. And Carvax 9, the living planet that had terrified 1,000 species across 1,000,000 years, became the heart of human civilization. It grew and evolved alongside its humans, becoming less of a world and more of a partner. The planetary consciousness, once focused only on consumption and survival, developed new depths. It learned art from human artists. It learned music from human musicians. It learned love from human families. In the end, the story of humanity and Carvax 9 became one of the great legends of the galaxy. Children of 100 species grew up hearing tales of the strange, stubborn, impossible creatures called humans who had been sent to die on a world that nothing could survive, and how that world had looked at them, studied them, tested them, and found them worthy, and feared them, and finally loved them. Because that was what humans did. They didn't just survive the impossible, they made the impossible their home. They made enemies into friends. They turned death sentences into new beginnings. They were human, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again.